I am live. Merry Christmas. Tree in the background. Pooch sleeping. Come say hi, Candy. Candy, the wonder pup. I should have named her Corona or COVID. We got her in March. Merry Christmas, everyone. It's Christmas Eve, 8 minutes until Christmas Day. The presents are under the tree. Little one's asleep. So we're all set to go. Go back to sleep. Put it away. There we go. So, had a good day. Went to church. Luckily, I'm in a part of Ontario where, as of today and tomorrow, churches are still allowed to gather in this area at 1/3, I believe, or 30% capacity. That meant the church I attend that we were allowed to have 100-ish people. There weren't that many, but it was pretty full. Chairs, doesn't have pews, has chairs splayed out in sections, some 2, some 3, some 4s, a few 5s, and had a very wonderful worship service. Going to church on Christmas Eve is a tradition for a lot of Christians, and I enjoyed it. And now I know that some are going to be saying, "Oh, you're not following the advice." Well, I'm following the rules. Following the rules. The rules say that you're allowed, and so we gathered. And it's wonderful for your mental health. It's wonderful for your spiritual health. But the Christmas present we're getting from the province of Ontario comes into effect at midnight, 12:01 Boxing Day. So as soon as Christmas is over, we're into a 4-week lockdown. That's what we're being told. That's 4 weeks in southern Ontario, 2 weeks in northern Ontario. So we're told it's a 4-week lockdown. And the science, or at least the scientists, some, not all, some are saying that this will act as they're calling it a circuit breaker. And that it'll basically stop the train of transmission. And that in 4 weeks, the government will be able to ease off on these restrictions. That's what we're being told. 4 weeks, and we'll go. And we're good to go. Then the restrictions can be eased off on. Should we count on that, though? The scientists or medical experts, stick whatever label you want, have been wrong so many times before. It's hard for me to have a great deal of confidence in them now. Full disclosure up front, I'm not an epidemiologist. I'm not a virologist. I have no accreditation in infectious disease or any other medical discipline. I've taken some undergraduate science courses at the university level, but I have no accreditation whatsoever. It's just one man's opinion. But the facts are that the medical experts have been wrong. Don't touch your eyes, nose, mouth. Oh, well, I'm at home. Let's look at the start. Dr. Tam and the World Health and many others were saying that we didn't need to close the borders and quarantine people coming from places even like Italy and Wuhan, China, that it wasn't warranted, it wasn't needed, and they were wrong. You'll remember in March of this year, when it all started, we were told 2 weeks. We need 2 weeks to flatten the curve. These are 2-week temporary measures. They were wrong. Remember, we were told SARS-CoV-2 right through the summer. We were told, no, it's not airborne. It's not airborne. It's not airborne. And again, they were wrong. Now, you can even go on to public mask mandates. We were told that, by having everyone wear a mask in indoor public places, that it would lower transmission rates. If we could get 90%, they said we can't expect 100% compliance because not everyone can wear a mask. But with 90% compliance, with masks asking as both a protective and a control measure that this would lower, case numbers. And again, they were wrong. Now I know there will be some who are apologists, and they will counter that they weren't wrong. The science evolved. Blah blah blah. And I'm sorry to say, but no, they were wrong. If they had said at the beginning, we don't know, but our best guess, based on the information we have so far, is that quarantining isn't necessary, that we should leave the borders open. We could be wrong, but they didn't say that. They stated categorically from the high altar of science, or from the great the high priests of science, we're stating it not as opinion, but as fact, as scientific fact. And they were wrong. And it doesn't help public confidence when those who are wrong refuse even to admit they were wrong. That when they make excuses for being wrong. Well, we weren't wrong. It was just we didn't have enough information. Well, then why did you state it as fact and not opinion? Opinions can be wrong. And don't tell people that, masks, we were told that this will be an effective control measure and that it would reduce case numbers. Hasn't happened. Case numbers since public mask mandates have come in have only gone up. And that's a fact. Why? You can express opinion on that, but outside of a randomized control or a randomized cluster trial, it's conjecture. So part of the reason for this video, though, is to say, okay, so we're entering a 4-week lockdown, 4 weeks, and then they'll be able to ease off on restrictions. And I don't think that is going to happen. I am expressing an opinion. I'll give you the facts of why I am expressing this opinion. One of the reasons is that closing small businesses down, closing down churches, closing down schools, these aren't the main drivers of transmission. If you go onto the Province of Ontario's own COVID portal page, you'll see that it's large enterprises. It's we've got National Post reporting within the last 3-4 days that in the Toronto airport area, Pearson International Airport, that there are 3 Amazon fulfillment centers that have, they're reporting that they have had 400 cases, but they do not get shut down. They continue operating. And if everything we're told is true about asymptomatic spread, there are asymptomatic individuals in that environment. They're continuing to work, spreading it to others. Others are going out to the gas station. They're going to the grocery stores. They're riding public transit. Spread, spread, spread. I mentioned that it's the around the airport. Well, there's another interesting one. The airport, where we've got planes coming into Toronto Pearson International from all over the world every single day, probably dozens of flights. I just opened the TorontoPearson.com arrivals page. You can search it yourself. And these are the arrivals for tomorrow. There's a plane coming from New Delhi. There's a plane coming from Sao Paulo, Brazil, from Cairo. We got planes coming in from, where else? International, New York's LaGuardia, from Newark, New Jersey, from Ethiopia. Another one from New Delhi, from Seoul, South Korea, from Philadelphia, from Charlotte, USA, Detroit, Frankfurt, Germany, Zurich. We got planes coming in from another one going into New York, coming in from New York, another one for Chicago, Newark, Beijing, China, Dubai, Qatar, Detroit, Fort Lauderdale, Fort Myers, Orlando, All three of those are in the wonderful state of Florida, which we're told has lots of cases. Chicago, USA, Cancun, Mexico. Another one from Frankfurt. Flight coming in from Montego Bay, Jamaica. Paris, France. Amsterdam. Houston. Veradero, Cuba. We got Nassau in the Bahamas. Fort Myers again. West Palm Beach. All these planes coming in. This is just tomorrow, and these are just the international flights. Cancun, Mexico. Two of them. Puerto Plata, the Dominican. Another one from Montego Bay. Washington, Dulles from Washington, D.C. We've got Washington Reagan, another one from D.C. Kingston, Jamaica. Newark, Chicago. Ponta Delgada, Portugal. All over the world, everyone's coming in. I'm just looking, I'm curious to see Washington Dulles. I had seen previously flights coming in from London, England. I'm not seeing any for tomorrow. Punta Cana, Hong Kong, Vieux Fort, I don't know where that is, LCA. Oh, here's one. We got one coming in at 8:15 tomorrow from London's Heathrow Airport. London, England, where we're told there's a new variant, a new strain of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And that was the arrivals up till about 8 o'clock. So there's still more after that. Chicago, Cancun, Detroit, Fort Lauderdale, Philadelphia, on and on and on. So just one coming from Heathrow. Remember, they didn't say they were stopping all flights. They said they were restricting. It's a nice wiggle word. Doesn't mean they're, it's hard to say exactly what it means, but it certainly obviously doesn't mean that all flights coming from England are banned. Yesterday, I saw one coming from Dublin, Ireland. So, has the strain gotten from England to Ireland? Well, I would imagine if it's in England, it's found its way to Ireland by now. I mean, this is the whole thing with the lockdowns. I know that a lot of people will say, well, look at New Zealand. It worked for New Zealand. And okay, New Zealand is not Canada. New Zealand is a small population, sparsely populated, incredibly isolated island nation in the South Pacific. If Canada had those advantages of being an island nation with a small and sparse population, perhaps the lockdowns would work, but they haven't worked so far, and I'm convinced they're not going to work now. And we can't really lock down. I know there are a lot of individuals who are saying, well, if we had a harsh lockdown, a really harsh lockdown, like they did in New Zealand, like they did in Australia, that would work. Then this would be over. And I'm here to say, I don't buy it, simply because of the fact that you can't lock down entirely. And the reason you can't lock down is you can't close the hospitals, can't close the police, you can't close the fire department, emergency services, paramedics, what have you. So they're out. You can't close the grocery stores because most people don't have 2 weeks worth of groceries in their house or their apartment or their residence. So you can't close them down. You can't close down the electricity grid. Those who maintain the grid, we have to maintain electricity. You're not going to close down internet connectivity because with so many people working at home, the internet is more essential now than it ever has been. So you can't close that down. So basically, you've got armies of workers. You can't slow down the supply chain that supplies all these other businesses. The grocery stores. The truckers have to be out. The warehouses filling the trucks have to be fully staffed. So virus is going to spread regardless. And you look at the GTA, the population. I don't know what the exact population of the GTA is, but I think it's probably in around 8-9 million people. Of this province is 18 million. And you look at the numbers, and we've done it in a fashion. You could say we've done a really good job because what are we, 10, 11 months into this pandemic? And less than 2% of the population has been identified as having been infected with a positive test. So better than 98% of us haven't gotten it, myself included. haven't gotten the virus, or if I have gotten it, it hasn't been confirmed. I've never had any COVID-ish symptoms, although as a smoker, which is something I should quit, talk to me in the new year. The three most common symptoms, at least this is from Nature magazine, they published the results of the studies that were done out of Iceland, and what they found in Iceland, at least for their population, is 43% of the people who were testing positive for COVID had absolutely no symptoms at all, zero. And then of those who did test positive, the most common symptoms were dry, non-productive cough, headaches, and muscle aches. So, sickness isn't even, lots of people get headaches, lots of people get a dry cough, lots of people get muscle aches, especially as you get older. Doesn't mean you have COVID, maybe not. So maybe you go get a test, maybe you don't. But if you go get a test, even if it does come back positive, you can't be sure that it is positive, because you can search it right here on YouTube and find out. Dr. Barbara Yaffe, she is the Associate Chief Medical Health Officer for the province of Ontario. She was doing a press conference with Doug Ford outside. It looked like a hospital, doesn't matter where it was. And Doug Ford, one of the reporters, asked him a question. The question they posed to Doug Ford was, why aren't we testing teachers proactively to get ahead of the curve? And he deferred, as he so often does. He deferred to, leave this for the medical experts. He said, sorry, Dr. Yaffe, can I have to ask you to come up again? So he traded spots with Dr. Yaffe. She came to the mic and she said, a lot of people think that testing is going to solve all our problems, but it won't. It just provides you, if you test someone today, you only know if they're infected today. It's that moment in time rationale we've heard about before, and that's perfectly fair and logical. But then the illuminating part was after that, she said, and if you're testing in an area with very little COVID, you're going to get false positives almost half the time. The person may have something else, they may have nothing. And that's Dr. Barbara Yaffe, who's Ontario's own Associate Chief Medical Health Officer. My assumption, and that's dangerous, but my assumption is that she's number 2 to Dr. David Williams, who is the Chief Medical Health Officer. So our report, this is the wonderful thing about all the lockdowns. I mean, for some, it's not that bad. So what? So I have to stay home a little more. It's okay. I work from home, or I'm retired. I have a stable income. So, and the grocery store is open, the pharmacy is open. The things that I need, I've got my electricity, I've got my internet. So life is not that bad. Lockdown is okay. It's a wonderful, the tunnel vision, just worrying about yourself. But the simple fact of the matter is that's not everyone's case. If you're a single mother, relying on income from a restaurant where you work as a waitress, sorry, you're out of work. And if you're the owner of a small business or the employee of a small business who's losing their livelihood, I know individuals who have poured, life savings into businesses that are absolutely being destroyed, and they're being destroyed by whom? By dictates that are coming from officials who have complete and total income security. They're 100%, Dr. David Williams, from what I read, makes something over $400,000 a year. Dr. Barbara Yaffe, I think it was $240,000. So these are the individuals who are taking, people's businesses away, destroying them, bankrupting them. And it's for public health, we're told. It's for public health. We have to do this. We have to flatten the curve. We got to, we're saving lives. Okay. So is there any consistency in this? Because I mentioned just now, I am a smoker. So just checking, my darts are in my pocket. Told why I'm 54 years of age. I don't ever recall once there being a serious discussion anywhere in this country about banning smoking, outright ban it. You want to save lives, according to the Conference Board of Canada. I forget what the number is per year, but because I'm going off memory. But I think it was 50, 60,000 people a year that they attributed death directly to smoking. Right? So it's about health. And we're also being told we have to say, we're going to crush the medical system. Well, apparently smoking costs, I don't know what how many smokers end up in hospital and ICU and all the rest, but the cost, according to the Conference Board of Canada study, this I do remember, was over $6 billion a year. You want to save the healthcare system $6 billion, give them money so that they can improve services? Because let's face it, in Ontario, our healthcare system was broken before this pandemic. During the last provincial election, Doug Ford and his PC party, one of their campaign pledges was to end hallway medicine. Hallway medicine meaning hospitals are over capacity. There's no room for people. There are no rooms for them, so they were put on a gurney or on a bed in the hallway. Hallway medicine. Now, from what I understand, I've yet to see any reports on hospitals being over capacity. So perhaps in a fashion, we could say that Doug Ford has kept his promise. He promised to end hallway medicine, and all it took was global pandemic to do it. It's a little bit cynical, but it's the mood I'm in. Cynical mood. Because, going back to smoking. One of the arguments people give, well, the reason they never wanted to ban smoking was because of the tax revenue. We need the tax revenue. Well, that doesn't bear up to logic either, because lockdown measures are hammering tax revenue, and we're borrowing like there's no tomorrow. So if it's the financial side of things, that makes no sense whatsoever. So why did they allow, what's different now? Crushing the healthcare system, overcapacity, because smoking is a major cause, probably the single biggest cause, but that's okay, and it always has been okay. Never even had a serious discussion about banning the production, sale, distribution, consumption, possession of tobacco products. If they did it now, it would make perfect logical sense. But it's not even up for debate. It's not even going to be discussed. Cigarette sales, incidentally, all smokers like me, we don't have to worry. Smoking is essential. Okay, booze is essential. Your child's school, my child's school, that's not essential. They can learn online. This is annoying. Still managed to keep my perspective on things. And a big part of the reason is, I told you at the beginning, where did I go today? I went to church. Got it open here. This is one of my Bibles. And I know churches gathering upset some people. They think that we're driving transmission, et cetera, et cetera. Costco's open, Walmart's open. Amazon is certainly open. No one's going to shut those down. We can go into the grocery store. 100 people plus can be in a large grocery store. But now, starting on Boxing Day, you can't have 10 or more than 10 people in a church at a time, no matter how big it is. And but in this country, we have a Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which is supposed to guarantee the right, the freedom to practice your religion. And what does the Christian faith say? It says, this is Hebrews chapter 10, verse 23, let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. So there you have biblical, scriptural direction saying, continue to gather. Do not forsake coming together. Now, I have a lot of friends, not all of whom are Christians, and that's fine. And they they like to bring up another chapter and verse, which I also have highlighted, if I can just find it. Here it is. Chapter 13, verse 1. And this is Paul's letter to the Romans. Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. So they say, the authorities tell you that churches should be closed, you've got to close. The issue I have with this is that this was written by the Apostle Paul, Saul of Tarsus. And many of the letters that he wrote that make up the New Testament, the Pauline letters, as they're called, were written from prison. And I don't know if Romans was specifically, but many of the letters he did write, he says in his letters that he's writing from prison. Why was he in prison? For going against Roman authority. So there are times when, for a Christian, disobeying is the godly thing to do, in my opinion. There are other references. I mean, Daniel's the most obvious one. That's in the Old Testament, where he prayed to Yahweh, to God, 3 times a day. And an edict went out that no one was to pray to anyone but Darius, the king of the Babylonian king. And so the edict went forth, and Daniel ignored it and was thrown into a den of lions. And you probably know the story. If you don't, it's in the book of Daniel. Surprise, surprise. So anyway, that's going to be the key for me, and it may be the key for others. To how do you get through this? There's something bigger, better, more eternal than the transient world we're living in right now, with these draconian measures, and that's what they are. Call it what it is. And these are draconian measures. It's overreach. There's no scientific basis for it. We're basically, this is an experiment. The effects of lockdown on controlling a virus, and does it work? Not in Canada. Again, maybe New Zealand, maybe a small, sparsely populated, lightly populated, isolated island country in the South Pacific. Maybe it works there. Maybe there are other factors in play. If you study science, if you know science, you know that causation does not, or rather correlation does not mean causation. Just because B came after A does not mean that A caused B. Had a conversation with this with respect to masks. Talking about some observational study where, the people in this hospital, they wore masks, and infected people came in, they didn't get infected. Ergo, masks must work. Well, there are other factors that could come into play as well. Does the hospital have ionization and UVB lighting in its ductwork? Many hospitals do. And my understanding of this technology used at Johns Hopkins, the Mayo Clinic, and lots of other hospitals, is that by having this equipment in the duct, in the ventilation system, basically what it does is it attaches to and breaks down the outer membrane of a virus, and it's gone. So the masks may be nothing more than just a mask that isn't doing anything. Denmark, I'm not talking, this is a Western European country, did the largest ever study on masking, public masking, to see if it had an effect on infection rates. And the Annals of Internal Medicine, peer-reviewed publication, published their results. And at the end, there was no difference between the masked arm and the unmasked arm. I think it was 4,800 participants, roughly half wearing masks, the other half not wearing masks, instructions on how to use them. And then they measured infection rates in the two arms. No statistically significant difference between the two. pick one. Your chances of getting infected in either arm was the same. And it lined up with what McMaster University themselves did a study. And what they found, and again, this was also published in the Annals of Internal Medicine. So again, it's peer-reviewed science. And what they found, and if you want the link, ask me, I'll post it, but you can Google it easily enough. They said that while there is no direct evidence to suggest that masks protect either the person wearing them or others, we suggest that the possibility of a modest reduction likely outweighs the potential for harm. So basically, they look, and what McMaster did, they didn't do any actual research themselves. What they did was they looked at over 100 years worth of study, research, randomized controlled trials, randomized cluster trials. They looked at all the research of over 100 years worth and pooled the analysis, and that was what their conclusions, that there's no direct evidence showing that masks protect anyone, not the person wearing them, not others. But their conclusion was that, but we suggest that there's a possibility, maybe, the possibility of maybe a modest reduction. We can't prove it, but that's their belief. They believe, and the belief is based on lower ends of science. Science has a hierarchy. It's like a criminal trial. Think of it that way. In a criminal trial, you have circumstantial evidence and you have eyewitness testimony. I think most people would realize that circumstantial evidence is inferior to eyewitness testimony. But in science, a randomized control trial, a randomized cluster trial, this would be the eyewitness testimony. Experiments, observational analysis would be circumstantial. Typically what happens is observational and experiments are used to formulate a hypothesis. And the hypothesis in this case would be that masks should prevent, should lower rates of viral infection. But then there have been at least 11 randomized cluster trials done in an effort to prove what has been observed, and they've all failed to prove it. Now, might they sometime in the future? That's entirely possible. And if they do, I will be all in. Right now, what I do, I'll show you my mask. I wear one of these. It's called a Mingle mask. I'm getting nothing for this, by the way. I'm not plugging them. I just use it. But secures just like a regular mask. Wore this in church today. There. Covers the nose, covers the chin, covers the mouth. Meets the requirements. And I'm not sucking air through a piece of cloth. That's important because you remember I just mentioned in the Annals of Internal Medicine, McMaster's published paper, after reviewing over 100 years of studies, trials, everything on masks, and they concluded that we suggested the possibility of a modest reduction in viral transmission likely outweighs the potential for harm. And you might ask, what harm? What harm could a mask do? Well, there's a British medical journal published study, 2015, an Australian research team did a 4-week trial with healthcare workers in Asia. I think it was in Vietnam. And they found that it was a randomized cluster trial. They found that the arm of the trial that was wearing cloth masks all working day long for the 4-week study period, had a 13 times increased risk of a bacterial infection. That was cloth masks. This is the only study that's ever been done on cloth masks. Then they had another arm that was wearing what I'll call medical masks, dental masks, like your dentist wears. And those masks had a 2 times increase, double the increase of developing a respiratory infection. And then their third group, hence why it's a cluster trial, their third group wore N95 type masks, but those masks were only worn procedurally as needed. And then when the procedure was done, they would be discarded and another one wouldn't be put on again until the next procedure. So they weren't wearing them all day long. And that arm of the trial had 0 increased risk of a respiratory infection over baseline. Baseline would be people do develop respiratory infections in the general population without masks. It happens. And so 13 times increased risk if you wear cloth, double the risk if you wear a medical mask. And in their trial, if N95 type masks worn only on an as needed basis when a procedure was being performed, 0 increased risk. And the way I came across that trial actually was on a CBC News article, which quoted a University of Toronto epidemiologist by the name of Dr. Colin Furness. I believe it's spelled F-U-R-S. And he was in a CBC News article back before masks were mandated. And he was quoting that research and saying, a British or, out of Great Britain, published study showed an increased risk of respiratory infection from wearing cloth masks. And he said, he said in the article, and it makes perfect logical sense. If you think about it, you're wearing a mask all day long, and you're creating this wonderful space for bacteria to develop and to multiply. And once they get to a certain level, you start inhaling them. And he went on to say that, in the world today, there is drug-resistant bacteria, and that getting a respiratory infection from a drug-resistant form of bacteria could quite easily be worse than getting COVID. And that really opened my eyes. So for me, it's never been that big a deal because I'm not having to wear a mask for hours on end a day. I'm not a retail worker. I'm not a school teacher. I'm not a student in a classroom. I do have a little guy who's in elementary school, and he wears that same type of mask that I just showed you. And that lowered my fear. I didn't want him sucking air through cloth, and I didn't want to rely on him or his teacher to remind him to swap out a mask every 2 hours, to take 3 a day and to have one on from 8 to 10, another one on from 10 until lunch, another one on for the afternoon. Plus then it's insanity. Besides which, according to Ontario's enhanced epidemiological summary that they published a few months back, it was actually back, I think, in June, and they broke down infection fatality rates by age, and 0 to 9 years of age, the recovery rate's like 0.999%, or rather, the recovery rate's 99.99 plus percent. Kids have population-wide, kids have a lower risk of COVID than they do riding the bus to go to school. You can only take that so far because every individual is different. If someone is suffering from lupus or any other autoimmune disorder, or if they have asthma, a myriad of other conditions. This pandemic has driven home the point that it's important to be healthy, make sure your vitamin D levels are high, because that's shown to be a major contributing factor to COVID being both potentially serious and possibly deadly. But anyway, I've droned on for 40 minutes. It's Christmas. And I have a little guy. I got all his presents under the tree. Remember the reason for the season. We don't know. Christians, we don't know when Jesus was born. The Bible, we have a wonderful account in Luke of Jesus' birth. No indication as to when it happened. Some biblical scholars, I've heard it said, I think it was in August. It doesn't matter, because the important thing isn't the date. The important thing is that Jesus' birth was the Word becoming flesh. It was God coming down and becoming fully human and finding peace, comfort, and security at a time like this can happen at any time. You invite him into your heart, acknowledge him as Lord, and life's easier to take. Doesn't mean you don't get worked up over stuff, but at least for me, it does help me find some peace. Does the ground under of this world is shaking, but the ground I'm standing on when I stand on my faith is rock solid. Anyway, I'll leave you with that. Peace and God bless. Merry Christmas. And here's hoping I'm at 100% absolutely wrong, and that for January 11th, the kids all start going back to school. After the 4-week period, they open everything. They ease off on the restrictions. We can go to church again. The small business owners, the ones who managed to hang on, can reopen and hopefully, start to build back. And but if that doesn't happen, I'll be okay. And I hope you will too. If you have a comment down there, I think. And if you want to if you want to share, Bob's your uncle. I just tell people I saw this idiot on YouTube, and I liked something he had to say. All right, where is it? End the stream. Bye now.